Hey students, Mr. Halpern here. Got my buddy Francis here. Say hi, Francis. Hi guys. So we left off talking about the sixth mass extinction, and we didn't really say anything about why it's happening. So there's some major causes of loss of biodiversity, and we're basically going to go through HIPCO. So the number one reason is loss of habitat. This is the greatest threat to biodiversity. It's literally a linear or a direct relationship between the number of people in the world and how much space they take up. And the more space we take up, the more habitat we destroy or lose. And more resources we use as well, obviously. So we're altering, degrading, destroying habitat through the increased size of cities and urban sprawl is the way we describe that. Through farming, because there are more people, there's more food required. Grazing from livestock, clearing forests for raw materials and for houses and for livestock again, and then damming rivers for power and energy. As we said, habitat loss. One of the specifics of habitat loss is not only that we're losing habitat across the board, but that we're breaking up the habitats into smaller and smaller pieces so that they're not as connected. And this helps actually some organisms, but it also hinders other organisms. And if we think back to the Serengeti case study, this is an example of how it might impact, for example, migration patterns. This is the amount of habitat loss by biome, with the temperate grasslands being the largest. Can you think of a reason why? Number one reason is because of farming and agriculture and grazing as a result of growing livestock. Again, the number of people in the world has increased substantially, and so we need more space for food. But also the chaparral, which is a drier climate, and it's prone to fire ecology, and it also happens to be a very sought after area. Places in California and the Mediterranean are where chaparral is found, and a lot of people want to live there. And the third one is temperate deciduous forest, which is us. Pollution. Pollution harms organisms many ways. Water pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, light pollution. Um, so you want to be able to say with a little bit more specificity, not just pollution, but examples of types of pollution. For example, heavy metals are a particular kind of persistent pollution, meaning that it stays in the ecosystem for a long time. Plastic is a solid pollution in the oceans, particularly microplastics we're really worried about right now. Um, Agricultural runoff, as we know, it causes hypoxia and eutrophication and dead zones, et cetera, et cetera. And also, as we said, growing population is one of the foundational reasons for why all of this is happening. We have a growing population, so we have growing consumption. So that means we're removing trees, we are eating more animals, we are removing fish at an alarming rate, over harvesting. Poaching. Poaching is another reason why we have a decrease in biodiversity. Poaching, as you read, is the illegal killing of wildlife for body parts or meat. This is a stockpile of illegal ivory from African elephants. Invasive species is another I. Invasive species are becoming more and more prevalent because of the globalization of our economy and the globalization of travel. And we have a lot of local invasive species. For example, the emerald ash borer bores into ash trees. And we have a lot of ash trees. About 11% of all of our trees around here were planted as ash about 50 to 100 years ago. And as a result of that, we're losing a lot of our trees because the ash borer is coming into Connecticut now. Other invasive species. These are all, if you've been out of the south, you've definitely seen kudzu. Kudzu is another, it's a Japanese vine. These are all affecting particularly vulnerable or specialist organisms that can't survive outside of a food range or a geographic range. Um, and we have to be careful about that. And climate change is also hurting biodiversity. It's shifting the ranges that organisms can live in. And some organisms can migrate and move, and some can't move fast enough. Um, and so um, organisms like polar bears have nowhere left to go and are especially vulnerable. And then it's also a mixture of causes that cause the decrease of biodiversity. Habitat loss is definitely one of them, but there's a mixture of a lot of these issues that can affect the population size.